is Black Mountain's own Larry Pearlman, and he has a story about possibly some misspent youth. You'd never guess it now. Now that he's, a respected elder of the community, his church, active in, I think, every civic organization that exists in Black Mountain. But I'll let him tell you about the bad part.
Buenos noches. Oh, wait, I got confused. Do you remember that feeling, that incredible feeling that you had when you were 18 years old? You just graduated high school. You got accepted to the university of your choice, and your parents were so proud. And they came up and they said, "We're so proud of you. Here are the keys to a brand new car." You remember that feeling?
No.
Me neither. Yeah. I mean, it's not that my parents weren't proud of me. They were. When I graduated Hillside High in 1965, got accepted into the engineering program at Rutgers University, they were proud of me. But there was no car. What there was a brand new Royal portable typewriter, which, since this was 1965 and years before personal computers, really did serve me well for the next 4 years, I have to admit that. But there was no car. So when I went home for Christmas vacation, I had to borrow my mom's car because I needed to do a term paper. I needed to go to the library. And she said, "Sure, honey, no problem, but be back by 4 o'clock because I have someplace I need to go." Piece of cake. Now, I didn't see anybody here that's under 40, or maybe there are, but if there were, I would have to explain how we did papers back then. See, we went to this, you all probably remember this, when we went to a building made out of brick and mortar. We called it the library, and we sat down at a real table, and we'd go and get actual books off the shelf. We'd put them all over, and then we had real paper and pens, and we had did we have index cards, right? Hundreds of index cards. And then you'd take all these notes, you'd read the books. Remember that? Reading the books. And then we would write them up on these index cards, and we'd organize them all over the place, and eventually you'd get a paper. But if you remember that process, sometimes you would get lost in it, and you'd lose track of time. And that's what happened to me. So I looked at my watch, 5 to 4, and I'm 15 minutes away. Oh my God, panic mode. I gathered everything up. I ran to the car, index cards flying all over the place. I get in the car and I go speeding. Now, speeding is the key word here. I go speeding through Hillside, and as I'm going down the road, sure enough, here comes a motorcycle cop going the other way. And I look in my mirror, and he's turning around. Now, Hillside, New Jersey, where I grew up, is 2.5 square miles. Small town. So when you're growing up, you get to know which police officers are officer friendly and which ones not so much. And I recognize this particular officer as Sergeant Lind. He was not officer friendly, particularly to teenagers. So I knew he was going to write me a ticket. So I just started to pull over, figured what the heck, pull over. And then I looked in my rearview mirror, and he hadn't turned his lights on yet. Now that meant he hadn't pulled me over yet. And the other thing I noticed was I was right by a corner. Well, the left brain left my head. And what took over was this primitive reptilian brain. You know, the kind that only knows fight or flight. Now, Officer Lind was an imposing man. He looked even bigger when he put on that uniform. And he never ceased to call your attention to the big custom sidearm that was on his hip. So fight was out of the question. So I turned that corner and I started driving like Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible. I mean, and keep in mind, this is in a 1965 Rambler American Classic. I'm going over sidewalks. I'm cutting through corners. I'm going over people's lawns. I'm turning left. I'm turning right. I'm doing this and that, trying to lose this guy. And after a while, I didn't see him in my rear view. So I figured, okay, he doesn't see me right now. Brilliant plan number one leaps into what's left of my brain. If I pull into somebody's backyard, he'll go right on by. And then I could just go the other way. I'm home free, right? So with this brilliant plan in mind, by the way, it's a miracle I didn't kill anybody on this trip. But fortunately for me, at that time of day, nobody was out walking, or I would have run over them for sure. So with this brilliant plan in mind, I cut over another sidewalk. I go through a guy's lawn, across his driveway, behind his house, park. And now I notice that attached to his garage, there's a shed, and the door is wide open. So phase two of my incredibly brilliant plan kicks into gear. I'll get out of the car, run into the shed, and then if he sees the car, surely if he doesn't see a person, he will think I'm not there and he'll just go away, right? No, okay. So I do this brilliant plan. Well, it didn't take Sherlock Holmes to notice the 4-inch deep tire treads across this guy's lawn going into his backyard. So the next thing I hear, come out of the shed with your hands over your head. Now this is something you never want to hear unless you're just watching a movie, right? So I do just what he said, out of the shed, my hands over my head. And the first thing I noticed, it was hard not to notice, was the barrel of a large bore weapon pointed at my face, similar to a Dirty Harry movie. And I did not want to make his day. So I decide right away, I'm going to do whatever he says. Now, you know the routine, right? Hands on the hood of the car, spread your legs, pats me down. And then he calls for backup. Backup. I'm a 145-pound, skinny 18-year-old kid with a 1965 Rambler American, and he calls for backup. So 2 squad cars come, with a lieutenant, mind you. And now they're asking me questions, and they're not happy with my answers. Now, I understand that. Nobody would be happy with my answers. Why did you run from the police? Well, I was afraid he was going to give me a ticket. You thought he was going to give you a ticket. So you broke every possible motor vehicle law in the book. Okay, why did you really run from? But no, I thought he was going to give me a ticket. So they're not buying any of this. So they impound my car. No. They impound my mother's car.
Yeah.
And they put me in the back seat, put your head down. I don't know why they always do that. Why do they do that? They're afraid you're going to hurt your head. They're taking you to jail. Put you in the back seat of the car, which is a place you don't ever want to be, in the back seat of a police car. And they take me to jail. Now I'm in the little room. You all know the little room, right? Because you've watched NCIS or you've watched whatever shows you watch, cop shows. It's the interrogation room. There's the table, there's the chair, there's the other chair. Fortunately for me, it was not Sergeant Lind doing the investigation. I neglected to tell you that after I saw the barrel of that big bore gun, the next thing I noticed was that his pants were ripped and his knee was bleeding profusely down his leg because he had laid the bike down chasing me, which did not bode well for me. He was not in a forgiving mood. So I think if he was doing the interrogation, it would have involved a rubber hose. You remember that whole thing? Oh, you don't? Good. But the guy who was doing the investigation was actually a very nice police officer. I was very happy about that until he left the room. He excused himself for a few minutes. When he came back, he said the words that no 18-year-old boy who has just done the stupidest thing in his life and the life of everybody in his entire family ever wants to hear. Your father's here, and he wants to talk to you alone. So I, of course, dropped to my knees and say, please, just arrest me. Here, put the cuffs on. Put me in a cell someplace. Protective custody, anything. Don't leave me here with my father in this room. Now, I really had no reason to fear my father. I mean, he had never hit me. He was not a violent man. But if you're 18 years old and you just did something this pathetically stupid, you don't want to be in a room alone with your father. So he really surprised me when he came in, sat down, and very calmly said, "Larry, what happened?" I said, "I don't know, Dad. My brain left my head. Okay, I don't know what I did." And then I kind of explained to him the details, what I remembered. And he said, "Okay, let's see what we need to do to get you out of here." Right? That was cool. So we went up to talk to the desk sergeant. Now, remember, Hillside's a small town. My dad lived there for much of his life. He knew most people in the town. The desk sergeant and he used to umpire Little League games together. So he talked to the desk sergeant, who then went to talk to Sergeant Lind, who by this time had calmed down a notch or two, and convinced him to drop the breaking and entering charge.
Wow.
Yeah, so you probably didn't know this, but if you go onto somebody's property and you enter a building, even if the door is wide open, that's breaking and entering, even though you didn't break anything. That's also a felony. That would have had a huge impact on my life. But he agreed to drop that charge, so they just revoked my license and set a court date for me to pay the 1,000 or so tickets he had written me that day. And that was that. And then on the ride home, my dad, of course, is talking about, "I don't understand how inconsiderate and irresponsible children can be. They don't get what impact this has on their fit." And of course, I'm getting smaller and smaller. I'm trying to get so small that I can fit between the back and the bottom of the seat and just disappear. And then I find out he's not talking about the fact that I just risked my life and the life of a policeman. No, he's not talking about the fact that I just broke myriad laws and was lucky not to have a felony on my record. No, in fact, he's not talking about me. He's talking about the fact that my sister that morning had promised my mother to do all the dishes and then left the house with all of them in the sink for her to do. Now, I did not realize it at the time, but years later, I got it. I got the lesson that my dad taught me that day without saying a word about it. When someone you love is down, don't kick them. Help them up. Now, I will say, since that time, just in recent years, another element of this story was called to my attention. Hillside, New Jersey in 1965 was an all-white town. Suppose, just suppose, I had been an 18-year-old black kid in that same situation. How much different might the ending of this story be? And I'll just leave that to you to consider.
Woo!